Sweating like crazy. What I ended up doing, it always never fails that the sort of simplest solution is maybe the most elegant. I used this chisel and I sharpened it really good with that sandpaper. And I chiseled off, let me see if I can get in there, hold on a sec. I chiseled off almost all of the spring perch there. I hand chiseled off in shavings. And then the little casting dots up there on the top, you can see they got little flat spots in them. I chiseled all of that out as well, and I just kept working at it until this 1-inch PVC pipe, and I got to cut it a little bit longer, but it actually goes up in there and wedges in between everything. And it actually seals up against that hole. Now I'm going to use some sort of two-part epoxy to get it. Let me see if I can shine this up in there. There we go. So you can see that it fits up in there, and then this is a 45-degree fitting. I'm going to sawzall that open a little bit, and we'll see what kind of fit I can get against the blade. I got it fixed, and if you notice, it's cut on an angle. It clears a 2x4 standing up. I haven't tested a 2x6 yet. I'll have to test a 2x6 and maybe shorten it. But basically, it's because of the way the machine is made, it sits off to the left just a teeny bit when it's actually centered, like so. And it's because of the way it's cast. However, it clears. You can see that it clears there, and I'll actually pull it out. It's fairly tight on its own, but I'll definitely secure it. That's basically what I cut in it. I'm going to glue that up and sand it out and make it look as nice as possible. But it collects 100% of the material that comes out of the saw, or about 90% for sure. I'm super happy with how much it collects. So what I'll do real quick, I'll go ahead and mount this up in the tripod and do a few cuts from the side and let you guys see the material shooting out. So hold on. So we'll go ahead and make a couple cuts on a 2x4. Now I also have the guard. I haven't even checked the guard yet. I've had the guard up the whole time. So it actually shuts against the guard pretty well. I mean, I'm guessing the guard can go down. It looks like the guard can go down a little more. I can't get it close enough to the saw. What I might do is heat it up and ovalize this tubing here. I'll have to experiment around a little bit with it, but it closes tight enough that it'll still work. So but yeah, all that stuff came out the actual chute instead of down here. I'm going to clean the table up tonight, and I'll actually hook the hose up to it tomorrow. And I don't have an adapter made yet, but we'll tape it up and do check some rough cuts with it in place and with the air system going. So I'm real happy that the solution just kind of jumped out at me, and I didn't have to deal with this stupid thing. But I know if I didn't make an effort, I wouldn't have got this far. So I will do a final follow-up with you guys tomorrow. Alright, I finally got around to cleaning up the countertop and getting this test ready to go. Prior to making this part, and I'll take this off real quick and you can see it. It's pretty simple. It's just a piece of 1-inch PVC. I haven't even had a chance to paint it yet. A 45-degree elbow, and then I shaped the nose of it by heating it up. You can heat PVC and shape it. So I just shaped it into kind of a square shape and then cut that out for the blade. And when I did all this shaping on the machine itself, and I actually plan on getting some screws to go in right here and tap into this so that it doesn't move around. I'd like it to be secure and held in place with some, finger screws like this. And I'll have to go to Ace and find out what'll work. But the way I shaped it, and I still have to work a little bit on the position, but the way it's shaped, the guard actually closes now. It actually is tapered, so it shuts over it, which is good. And I got what I got for the back. Well, maybe I should start over. So originally I had put this piece in there, and this is a piece of plaster Paris that I had broke a number of times and shaped to fit up inside of there. And I'll probably put on my video some of the sanding and shaping, and I tried to melt milk cartons to shape over it. I also tried to use polypropylene, and none of that crap worked the way I wanted it to. If I had a vacuum table, I might have been able to make the, I forget what it is, PTFE or whatever, work, but it just didn't. None of it worked. And so this was a huge, this is one of those learning processes. So I ended up going back to something simple like this. Now, the one thing I would have done different is I would have made this PVC go all the way through the casting and then cut it off even with the back. Right now it fits in there kind of like a socket. I found this adapter. Let me show you that before we get a whole lot further here. So at the plumbing store, this is just a 2 to 3 rubber adapter. It perfectly fits this Harbor Freight piece, and then it fits this flexible shop vac hose. And I was going to get some blast gates, and I just haven't had time to make them. I've got something I clean the table off with, a vacuum hose, and I've got to plug it because I don't have blast gates set up yet. That's going to be one of my next projects. So I'll grab a piece of tape real quick and throw it over this thing. Anyways, it took a number of times of fooling with this thing to get this right. And the cool thing about the one nice thing is, so it's got a caveat, and the caveat is that it does not work on taller pieces of wood, and it also doesn't work when the blade is out. Now, I don't use my chop saw a lot in cross-cutting large pieces, so I'll show you that real quick too. So here's the issue. If it cuts straight down, you can see that it clears just fine. Make sure that's in view. Yep. So you can see that it clears the wood no problem. Now, if I loosen this up and I slide this forward, you can see that it'll no longer clear. It would actually hit. And I marked it on the other side of the saw to show how much it would hit. So one of the things that a person could do, you could trim it down to a 2x4, but no matter what, if you flip a board up this direction in the extended position, it can hit just about anywhere, clear back to here in the back. You can see that, let me make sure, yeah, you can see that it would hit clear back on the elbow. So in those cases, I've made it easy to pull off, and if I get these set screws, I'll just make it so they barely go in, and you just thread those out and pop it off. I can pop this straight off, no problem. But in the back position, which is where I use it most of the time, it works just fine. It clears the wood even standing up. You can see that I cut it so that it actually clears a 2x4. And I believe it'll clear a 2x6, maybe not quite. It might, it looks like maybe I'd have to go a little bit, I'd have to cut a little more off, but. So I'm going to fool around with it. I may even end up making like a soft shroud for the nose, you know, a flexible nose piece would be cool. Or what's really too bad is that Harbor Freight didn't have little suction things that came down on either side of the blade and sucked from both sides of the blade. But irregardless, you can grind that out. It takes a lot of work. I had to grind almost the entire spring post off. And it was a real big pain in the ass, but I think it's worth it because it doesn't spray dust everywhere like it did before. It does still spray some. There's still some sawdust that goes everywhere, but not near as bad as before. And it doesn't throw. And it doesn't. There's not a big box, you know, like the ones online. And you can see. I'll turn this on real quick. The laser stops projecting about here. This is about where it blocks it. But the laser can still be used for rough positioning, which is great. And so I'm pretty happy with it. So when I turn my dust collector on, you'll have to excuse me. It's got a bearing that's going out, and I haven't taken the time to tear it apart because when I tear it apart, I'm going to replace the entire impeller section. So in the meantime, it'll get really loud. I'm going to turn the air on. I'll sweep this out real quick and make sure there's nothing back here so that you guys can see what ends up behind the saw after I get done. And we'll do a quick run here. So I'll make a couple of cuts. All right, so I thought I'd show kind of the dust pattern on this side. It's not as good as I'd like it to be. I think it probably catches about 50%. I either made 3 or 4 cuts. I can't remember how much. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to sweep this up into a pile. I already have a pile on this side. I cleaned up this side. Seems to get less dust on this side, and if you look at the blade, there's a little more gap on this side than there is this side, and that just has to do with the way that it fits in the saw. It doesn't fit straight. It's off to one side just by the design of the saw. But I'm going to go ahead and sweep this up, and then I'm going to do 4 more cuts with the dust with that out, and we'll see how much dust I get from that. So I'll go ahead and clean this up, and then I'll make another we'll do 4. I'll do 4 cuts, and we'll see how that turns out. All right, 4 more cuts, and you can see there's definitely more on this side. How much, I don't know. We'll see here in a minute. I noticed the pattern over here is different too. You can see it's further out, and there's a spot where it there must be a lot of air pressure right there where it blows away from the wall. So I'll go ahead and sweep this up, and then I'll give my final thoughts and future modifications. All right, so here's the pile with the dust collection system on, and with and I'll put, oops, sorry guys, I'll put the tape measure next to it to give it some scale. That's the pile with dust collection and with the scoop on. And then this is the pile without this dust collection on. And it's a little bit taller and probably I'm going to say there's another 50% more chips. So we'll say that the dust collection system, if I had to make a real uneducated guess, is collecting about half the chips. And so I'm going to get you guys set up in the tripod, and then we'll talk. I'll do some final thoughts. Okay, so to give you perspective, there's the two piles. I know the one's not lit up real well, but you can see the difference in size. And I'll talk a little bit about what I'm going to do here. So I had originally talked about, oh, gosh, clumsy me. I had originally talked about replacing this fence, not replacing it, excuse me. What I was originally going to do was I was going to bevel the fence. I know that the way they had the chop saw station at work, they actually built a custom fence where there was a gap between the back fence and the bottom board, and any sawdust that got shoved into the crack dropped straight down. The back board actually passed behind the deck. I pulled this off, and this is the only place this actually bears against this bottom plate. In other words, right underneath where my finger's at, yeah, you guys can see it, this is only about under a 1/16 of an inch thick, this face is. So I can't bevel it. It won't sit level anymore. And this whole piece is pretty flimsy. So what I'm going to do in the future, so I have two issues. When you come down, most of the dust off this saw, let me unplug this and I'll cut my fingers off. Most of the dust comes off, and hopefully you guys can see my finger. Yeah, you can. Comes straight back, hits this bevel and kind of this boss, and gets blown all over the place. So one of the other things I'd like to do in the future is replace this back piece with a piece of laminate coated plywood or laminate coated what am I trying to think of? Not melamine, not chipboard. My brain's gone blank. So one of the things I'd like to replace this back plate with is some laminate coated MDF, or what would be even better is laminate coated MDX, because that's exterior grade, but I don't know that they even make such a thing. So if I do an MDF backer here, what I can do is when I let all this material out, I can actually make a small scoop that'll stay below the height of this laser, but it'll catch all this material that gets blown back into here. And I would even like to rig something up to pull material down through this slot here. I don't know if that's possible. I haven't looked into it yet. But I'd like to see, with just by setting up a real low profile box here, if I could come up with something that would actually pull a whole bunch of the dust away that gets shot back. So that's going to be another one of the down the road experiments. I'm modestly happy with this suction tube here. If I had to say whether it was worth it or not, I'd say that's entirely up to you. I had to cut out all the material inside of here. I probably have 8 hours into just removing the aluminum inside of this case. What would really be nice is if Harbor Freight would do it on their own and come up with something better than what they've got now, but something tells me they won't do that. What would really be nice is if there was something that came off the back here and was real short, so that when the saw's in its down position, it would all stay back in here somewhere. You know, if they designed it like this and just brought it in right here to this shape. So I don't know. You know, I don't know if Harbor Freight is Chinese or if they've got an American side, and I just don't know, have any idea. But it works about 50%. Now, when I make the modification to my dust collection system, because there'll be a lot more draw, I'm hoping that may get better. I may do a secondary test and see how much is able to be collected. But for now, if you've got spare time and you want to do it, go for it. It definitely collects some of the dust for sure, but not as much as I would want it to. So hope that helps somebody out. Thanks.